Yo, what's up? Welcome back. Today I'm going to show you how to turn this mix
I'm kinda lovesick and sick of love.
into this sick, modern, slamming headbanger of a track.
I'm kinda lovesick and sick of love at the same time.
Oh my god, I'm gonna throw up from headbanging so hard. Hey, so if you don't know me, my name is Petexzen. I'm a producer here in LA. I've been producing bands ever since I was basically a little kid, and I had a CD player that had a treble and boost switch on it, and I discovered All Killer No Filler and Take Off Your Pants and Jacket by Blink-182, changing the trajectory of my life. I've produced hundreds of records. I'm currently working on 15 bands right now. I do all types of productions and mixes, from super polished stuff like this to super raw dog type stuff like this.
We only talk when we're intoxicated. Hey. Love LA.
To full productions in other studios with tons of analog gear and live drums and comped vocals and the whole 9 yards like this.
It's not even new. Whoa! Everybody hates.
But today I have a track that's perfectly down the middle. It's Bad Year by Rana. Nothing too crazy in the production. It's drums, bass, guitars, vocals, and it is produced out so it does slam. There's not like break beats and 808s and thousands of vocal layers. It's pretty straight up just a sick punk track. Before I break down this entire mix and really break down part by part, there's a couple things that are really important that you nail before you get to the mixing part. One, is your song sick? Did you actually write a good song that makes sense with lyrics that make sense and they convey a feeling and it can be played on just an acoustic guitar and vocals and it sounds awesome? Two, did you produce this properly and engineer this properly? Are things not clipping going in when you record them? Are your strings changed on your guitar? Probably freaking not. Go change your strings and get your guitar set up. Three, is everything tracked tightly and edited to time so that when you go to mix things, you're not compensating for issues like somebody mumbling their vocals? Why aren't the vocals loud enough? They are loud enough. You just can't understand the guy. I don't really like the guitar tone. Maybe you do like the guitar tone. Maybe the guitar is just out of tune and the guitarist is not playing hard enough. Add all these things together, sugar, spice, everything nice, and then you get a beautiful production that is ready to be mixed. It already sounds 90% of the way there from your mix. If it doesn't already sound great playing it raw dog, at least giving you some sort of emotion that you're in the right direction, then I think you need to go back to the drawing board. All right, so let's get into it. First things first, drums, where are we at? It's freaking hot in here. Okay, drums sound cool. You got the basketball snare. You got that kick sort of feeling really console-y and farted out into a Neve 1073. You have the cymbals pumping slightly. I was using Get Good Invasion, traditionally a metal kit. I mean, look at this thing. This is a freaking Slipknot ass kit. I'd assume that I used this kit. I did this production a little bit ago. Probably now I would use Modern and Massive too by Get Good Drums because I really love the routing and the way that you can shape the transients. One thing that I really like out of this kit is that the cymbals feel pretty real, but the transients can be messed with in the individual tracks here. So if I was to play the kick with all of the transients at full length, not messing with the samples at all, versus if I turn on all these guys here, it feels a little bit tighter and a little bit cleaner so that when you're squashing the drum bus later, it's not getting too bloomy and too reverby. What I usually do is I'll route out each individual mic into each channel, and then as you see, it's routed out into kick, snare, rack, floor, hat, ride, overhead, room, far mic. So if you do all those things together, then you can actually mix each individual track rather than being stuck in this and then mixing only a drum bus. As you can hear, a lot of the kick sound is from the rooms, but here's how I affected the close mic. So first we have Decapitator, kind of farting things out a little bit. And then we are hitting Neve 1073, no EQ going on, just getting it to the point where it's clipping the console sound a little bit. And then we have our EQ cutting out a ton of boxiness around 500 hertz using Pro Q4, taking out some click here and boosting up the low end at 60 hertz. And the way that I would usually go about doing this is there's a little headphone thing here. And what I do is I grab it, play it so I can hear just the frequency and pick really where I want this to be pinpointed. Same thing with the mid-range. And usually nowadays what I try to do is I try to close my eyes as I'm doing it. That way I'm not mixing with my eyes. Because if you look at the actual waveform playing, like there's a spike right here that you would think, I don't know if I like that spike. Like that's the kick drum. But then if you solo it, it's kind of the part of the kick that hits you in the chest, and it's the real body of it, so I wouldn't want to get rid of that. So I'm going to take out everything in the middle between that, making it feel a little bit more modern, and then taking away some click, because I guess that this Invasion kit by Get Good Drums is a little bit more metal sounding. And then last thing, just doing a trim so that I didn't affect any of the other sort of things I had going on. Maybe this was on mix 3. After doing a listen on my Bluetooth speaker or whatever it is, the kick is a little bit loud and I don't want to mess with anything else. Usually I'll just throw a trim on and affect it from that point. So the next thing is what I'd usually do is like turn on the rooms and sort of level those in a little bit with the kick sound. And the way I would level that in is I would go to contact and change the actual effect of the room, of the kick going into the room, which is why I like this program. Real quickly, before I dive too deep in this, if you do want to record live drums, obviously it has to be recorded really well and you need the most separation possible. So if that means sticking your kick mic way up in there so that you have more control over it, then do that. If that means your snare mic is away from the hi-hat so you're not getting as much snare bleed, do that. And then same thing with the tom, point it away from the snare a little bit off axis. I see a lot of people miking things straight down on the tom, and to me that never made sense because you're gonna get a lot of the snare information. So I usually point it away from the tom towards the rest of the kick so that there's not this buildup of different frequencies. If you have enough preamps, close mic the cymbals as well so you can control those individual volumes. If you don't have enough preamps, which a lot of people don't in home studios or smaller studios, bring down the close mics a little bit more, because when all is said and done, if you're not liking how your kit's sounding, you can always fall back on getting phase accurate MIDI notes and then re-triggering whatever sounds you want that have controllable velocities. You're gonna want to replace the sounds and then use your cymbals. So if you're close micing your cymbals a little bit more, then you have a little bit more control over your actual shell sounds and your actual drum sounds. Everything I'm doing to this kit right now would be the same thing that I'd be doing to a live kit, except maybe before this stage, I would be gating a little bit or getting phase accurate MIDI notes so that I can do a real gate and then run it into a parallel, basically same thing like I'm running now next to your live drum sound. That's important to know too. I am totally capable of doing live drums. I love doing live drums, but nowadays it's really tricky to get it to sound competitive without a lot of sample augmentation. Snare, same thing, running it through Decapitator. So giving it a lot of volume, giving it a lot of grit. Channel E is my favorite. It's the most airy channel. Not messing with the low or the high or the tone, just gritting it out. Next, hitting that 1073 again. The grit of it brings out this little bit of a fart of a low end. And I keep saying fart for like the sound of distortion sort of crushing thing and compressing something in a nice way. It does look like I'm hitting a little bit of this 12K shelf, and that's it. I mean, it's just a little bit of brightness added in from this 1073. Next, we got our EQ. So there was a little bit of a ping ring going on here and right here, and that's why that's super sharp and tucked out. I'm gonna show you how I got there. So that was in the sound of the snare. If I turn off, and then same thing here. So just getting rid of any sort of weird frequencies. There's another one here and here, but I thought they were kind of nice. Boosting some of the fundamental of the snare, which is sitting around 140 for this guy. And then controlling the low end. Just the rumble thump frequencies. Giving it the slightest bit of click, and then taking away some of that snap. I feel like sometimes taking away that 3K range kind of makes the snare feel a little bit fatter because it's getting rid of a lot of that crack from the snare. Adding in some samples, adding in these dodgeball snares. Blended in 10%. Super sick. And then again, a trim. Just ducking it out. Probably as I was affecting the drum bus, things were pumping into the compressors a little too hard and probably dialed it back, or like I said before on mix 3, tone that back. And then rack and floor, let's pull up the EQ curves real quick. Every tom is going to be different, but here are the fundamentals that I usually look out for. What is the low end fundamental? So on this rack, it's 100 hertz. What is the body? 340. What is the snap? Around 3K, a little bit lower. And then what is the click? Around 8K. Same thing with the floor tom, taking out all that mid-range boxiness, taking out a bunch of snap and giving it a shelf high just to brighten it up. And then 45 hertz was the fundamental. And then you bring in the rooms. Like I said, the rooms are doing a heavy lift on this, even on the overheads. So on the overhead, I'm just compressing the overheads a little bit so that the transients of the snare and the kick aren't poking above the cymbals too hard. Distortion 3. High passing, 3-to-1 ratio, hitting like 3 dB of compression. Sick ass fill. Yep. So that's in the snare, taking that out because as you build into the drum bus, you don't want that sort of frequency building up into your overall sound. And then taking out a bunch of mid-range, taking out a bunch of mid-range, taking out all the thump in the low end, which if you're using headphones, you can just feel it. And then bringing in some brightness. Okay, and then next, room. Kick is doing a lot of work in there. Taking out a bunch of mid-range and just taking out the sub frequencies. Really sick. And then the room far, sort of the same thing, but just addressing the snare issues that I found. And also probably a little bit of separation between the kick and the snare so that the room didn't get so washy in that frequency. As you can hear, it's like every drum in that frequency. And if you divide it, you can see the kick hitting right here and the snare hitting right here. Putting a little divide in it is going to help separate things a little bit more. Boosting up that kick, taking out some mid-range. So here's a cool thing. Looks like on this mix, I don't always do this, but on this mix, I did a Sans amp send. So a distortion, basically a send from, looks like all the shells. So all the shells are going to this Sans gate. So if I just turn off everything but the shells, so as you can hear, it's activating this gate. And then it's going straight into a Sans amp that's gritty as hell. That's the sound that's going to the drum bus. So just giving a little bit more of that spike of attack, which I think is really freaking sick. And it looks like I turned it up towards the end where the breakdown hits. And then I also have another shell bus, wide open, not gated, running into Metric Halo Reverb. Make Believe Studios, I believe, sent me this, and it's incredible. It's really good for just the general ambience of drums. And it looks like I'm just using Kevin McComb's shell verb. I probably opened this thing, I'm like, yeah, that sounds good. And then the heavy lift of the drum bus. I'm gonna turn everything off here. So what I usually do is I'll mix these individual tracks and I'll have them soloed, and then I'll start feeding the drum bus, and then I'll jump back and forth between the individual tracks and the drum bus to find a place of meeting in the middle. Because obviously when I turned off all that stuff and I just played it, it's a lot freaking quieter. I do a lot of processing on my drum bus. It's a big part of my sound. So I'm gonna show you the freaking sauce. First things first, this Studer tape machine. We'll call it a stutter. I really do love this tape machine because you have this setting here. If you click the Studer, you can control the EQ a little bit more, the shelf, the high shelf and the low shelf. So check it out, on and off. Obviously a volume difference. But to me, what I hear is some more sizzle in the top end of the cymbals and a little bit more control in the rumble and the low end. If you can see, I turned down the low pass filter a bunch. And then it's at 30 IPS, so the fastest amount that the tape machine can go on the GP9, which felt like it had the most mid-range and the most bite to it. So, and check it out. I'm not really even hitting the red here. It's pushing up to about -5. So that's enough to start to really hear the sizzle in the cymbals, but not enough to where the low end is starting to really poof out. Next thing, arouser. Usually I use a distressor, but on this, I was trying this guy out and I thought it sounded really good. So what I usually do is I get to the point where I usually have a little bit faster of a release than this, and then I try to find the point of the attack to where the cymbals feel like they're pumping on beat. Whether that's an 8th note or a 16th note or whatever. I try to be musical about the way that I really pump the compression. So you can hear the transient poking through a little bit more. I didn't want my drums to be that pokey. On. And also the saturation in this thing is going pretty hard. Obviously you can get crazy with it. I think it sounds awesome. Blending in the mix too, so it's like 60% wet. Good amount of compression, but nothing over the top to where it's affecting the overall like sound of the drums. It's affecting the feel more so than the sound. Next, hitting a clipper. Really clipping that snare. Gold and alchemy all the way up. To me, it just sort of rounds out the sound and brings some stereo information. So just controlling the actual transient of it, clipping the top end. Next, some overall EQ, adding some separation between the kick and the snare, getting rid of 16 hertz, the only frequency that like elephants can hear. As I'm hitting the master bus, I just don't want that information affecting my compressors and soothe and things like that in my master bus. So nothing too crazy going on there. Then hit and soothe. Here's what it's getting rid of. Getting rid of a little bit of snap from the snare, a little bit of low end from the kick and the snare, and some very slight harshness in the cymbals. Because it's pretty even across the board, that tells me that I did a pretty good job at leveling things out, and there's not any sort of crazy buildup of frequency in the rest of my mix before that. This is a good last check and a last sort of intelligent compressor safeguard for your drum bus. And then hitting my frickin' sauce. You can't get this plugin anymore. They have a new one. A good alternative is the arouser and hitting that harder, or a distressor. But this soft tube FET compressor is my frickin' sauce, dude. Turn the look ahead up, release as fast as possible, attack somewhere in the middle. Whether you want the song to be a little bit more sludgy, sort of like this one, I would pull it a little slower. If the song is a little more aggressive and in your face, I would pull a little faster. That way you can smush the drums a little bit quicker. 65% dry on this mix and an 8-to-1 ratio. Check it out. On. Off. So it brings out the rooms, brings out a pump when the kick and the snare hit. Man, I freaking love this compressor. So good. Mix head, adding some drive, affecting the high filter. So this is going to bring out some highs. And then my tape speed is 30. Check it out on and off. On. To me, too, it does bring out a little bit of stereo dimension. So I don't know if the drive is affecting maybe only the mid frequency, or maybe there's just a buildup of mono mid information that is gridding out a little bit more. So it's, in theory, pulling up the sides. I'm not sure if that's the case or if this is doing some sort of magic. And then last thing, a pull tech. I am boosting and attenuating 60 hertz on the kick. Pretty wide band and not really doing anything else on here, so just bringing a little bit of low end. But, you know, every mix, I have my go-to things. Like, I know I'm going to use Pro Q4 on everything. I know that I'm going to probably use Decapitator or a Neve 1073 or a Distressor. But that doesn't mean I don't start every mix from scratch trying to really figure out what the essence of this band is, which to me, this band is like a modern, heavy Green Day sort of thing. All right, so let's check out the freaking bass. Heavy lift going on in the bass. Great tracking. All right, so I'm gonna turn everything off. CLA bass. First, it's a nice, easy plugin that's standard, that just sounds freaking good. Otherwise, I'm probably gonna use the Pro Tools stock SansAmp or one of my buddy's plugins that is like a SansAmp type thing. So check it out on and off. The bass DI itself already sounds great, but compressing the hell out of it, bringing in a ton of sub, bringing in a ton of high end here, and adding a little bit of distortion, nothing too crazy, and then chorus just for some stereo width. Next. All the mid-range in the universe apparently on this bass. So around 2K and 800 hertz, cutting out some of the fizz on the top end. cutting out the rumble frequencies on the low end. Next, controlling it with a distressor. Nuking it, distortion 3, getting close to like 10 dB of compression, 5.5, and just controlling volume all the way out. R bass, pumping the low end and all the sub information. Soothe, bringing it back down, controlling it, because bass is a super dynamic instrument. That's what I'm getting rid of. A lot of the thump from the pick attack. Next. Controlling some of the low frequency with a multi-band compressor and the high frequency. Here's what I'm controlling. Usually what I do is I bring it to the point where it's mostly just note. So somewhere around there sounds good. And then same thing with the high end. Mostly just the fizz of the bass. That way I can control those separately. How much fizz, how much low end. Next, ducking the kick with another multi-band. I have it running to bus 15. If you look at the kick, there's bus 15. And then you can watch it when you turn on the kick. Activate so that the bass is getting out of the way every time the kick hits. It adds a nice pump to the whole mix, and it also helps control the low end so that when the kick's hitting, the bass isn't also building up on top of that and creating just rumble frequency madness. Next, I was just looking through these presets on this reverb here, and Joel Wozniak has this rips on bass, so I freaking tried it out. I think it's really cool. Makes it sound like it's like a cab in a room, and adding some stereo width, which I think is really important on bass. A lot of people don't do that nowadays, but I think that's kind of a cool trick. And then last thing, some more EQ, some more mid-range, and some more thump. And then a trim at the end, just controlling everything. Bass was a lot quicker than drums, huh? Let's check out the guitars. A bunch of guitar layers here. You have your intro track with your intro guitar, rat pedal into amplitude using the Thunderverb 200, treble all the way up, mid-range all the way up, bass all the way down, or bass at 4, just a noise gate running. Going to the cab using a Royer 121 and a 414, the mic I'm talking into some V30 speakers. The room ambience is all the way down, and the 414 is also at a 45-degree angle. Pretty standard stuff. And then hitting Devil Lock, just the crunch and the fastest release, blended in 76% because I like the hair that this gives to this guitar. So stereo tracked, pan 70, 70 just for the intro. As you can see, it automates out 100% once everything kicks in. And then other guitars come in. And then I also have this production thing that I was doing. It's just, I recorded with a stereo XY pattern of just playing the guitar in the room while we track these guitars. With Devil Lock on it. And then controlling some of the lows and some of the high. That was a little bit harsh. So all of them together, running into a bus with RX, just adding a little bit of compression. Check it out. Sounds freaking cool. And then we have this fuzz channel. Recorded with a real fuzz pedal going in on my board over here into amplitude, probably same thing. Yep, same sort of settings, same miking, same everything. And then hitting some EQ, controlling some of the high, controlling some of the harshness, controlling a bunch of the mids because the fuzz kind of scoops the guitars, and then getting rid of any rumble frequency here. That's a pretty harsh frequency. So imagine that in the mix. Across, what, 8 guitars going at once? It's kind of a buildup of a mess. And some brightness. RX. Controlling the compression a little bit. And then hitting Devil Lock. Really adding air on the top end. And then using this SSL just to boost some highs at around 8K, 7.5K actually. Pull the V gain all the way down. Threshold all the way down, control more of the low end, taking out anything below 143 hertz, just making sure that rumble frequency is cut out. And that's everything for these guitars, so these two together. With the other guitar, with the bass, with the drums. Sick, sounding good. So no amp sim on this, all fizz, all straight DI into this Philly DI. Check it out on and off. Just giving the DI a little bit more aggression. Sounds sick, straight into a rat pedal. All the fizz in the world. Control it with a compressor. Address some issues. A lot of fizz going on. Pull it back. Mid-range. Bring it the frick up. Take out the low end. That's just gonna get in the way of the kick and the bass guitar and the vocals, and it's just gonna make everything messy. Probably adding a little bit of slap. Yeah, so guitar cab in the room. Here, I'll crank it so you can really hear what's going on. Making it feel a little bit more real. And then same thing on the other side. So that's it for guitars. And then you add in some percussion elements and a signature that I always use, a glass break on an impact. I just think it's cool. So all those together. There's really nothing too crazy. I would say the craziest thing on this whole mix is, I mean, there's some pretty cool vocal production, but the Sans amp gate on the drums is probably the only thing that I tried to do on this mix to really give the band a little bit more of an identity across its entire record. So it didn't just sound like Get Good Drums, Modern and Massive, whatever. So that's one of the main things. And then also tracking in with pedals and then also doing one channel of guitars without an amp, I think gives it that sort of like raw punk edge to it. So the vocal chain is really important. If you don't have any outboard gear like I do, then what you can do is record it very cleanly, throw a frickin' blanket over your head, and make sure that there's no ambient noise in the room when you're recording. And if you have an SM7, which a lot of people do, that's a great mic that takes plugins well and takes compressors really well, any sort of other condenser as an alternative. So let's go to the main vocal and let's see what we're doing.
I'm kind of lovesick.
Going crazy.
Sick of love at the same time.
If you look at this verse vocal, there's a bunch of plugins on it, and then it's also hitting all these different split offs. So I have a vocal double, I have a reverb, and then I also have my room vocal, and then I have my all vocal bus. So I'm gonna leave that on for now, but I am gonna mute my doubler and my reverb and my room. Check out the vocal without the doubler.
I'm kind of lovesick and sick of love at the same time.
Sounding sick. We use my AKG 414 into my LA 610, probably getting like 1 to 2 dB of compression at the loudest points, boosting the high a little bit at 7K, and then taking out a little bit of low end at 70 Hertz, -3 dB, and then hitting my Audioscape 1176. Like I said before, if you record your vocal in clean, the first thing I would hit in your chain would be some sort of really heavy hitting compressor like an 1176 or a distressor. Gain reduction by JST is another good option. First thing first, some auto tune.
I'm kind of lovesick.
Pretty light on this, 25, 25, humanize at 5. Distressor.
I'm kind of
I have a real one right here, so I don't do this anymore. Before I got this, this is what I would use, and it sounds awesome. Distortion 2, high pass, nuke the frick out of the vocal.
I'm kind of lovesick.
I'm getting a ton of compression.
Sick of love at the same time. Secrets all through the grapevine.
High shelf, mid-range bite, taking out some body, and then cleaning up the lows.
I'm kind of love and sick of love at the same time. Secrets all through the grapevine. But I don't care what they say.
Really sick. As you can hear, it's starting to add a couple little weird things, like the S's are a lot more intense, and the bite of the vocal is a lot more intense. So next thing I do is I hit decapitator just to grid out some of the information that's poking out a little bit too much.
I'm kind of lovesick and sick of love at the same time. Secrets.
I think it's sick. I think it gives it a lot of attitude. And then I'm blasting the vocal with gain reduction.
I'm kind of lovesick and sick of love at the same time.
Bringing it forward and in your face. And the last thing I'm doing is de-essing. Pretty heavy amount, and then adding in some air back to the overall vocal. On this de-esser, specifically the 902 de-esser, it's in a plug-in alliance bundle. I really love the air on this guy.
I'm kind of lovesick and sick of love at the same time.
And so that vocal is going right down the middle, going to ascend bus 3 and 4, which is this vocal double, and then a reverb, and then a room. So check it out. So my vocal double is a doubler with no mid information, only the left and the right, and then hitting S1 to spread it even more.
And sick of love at the same time. Secrets all through the grapevine.
Doing a heavy lift.
But I don't care what.
And then a reverb.
And sick of love at the same time. Secrets all through the grapevine.
And then a room channel blasting through a rat pedal, and then a Valhalla room.
And sick of love at the same time. Secrets all
Crank
through
it so
the
you guys can hear it.
grapevine. But I don't care what they say.
Again, just adding in a ton of aggression there. So then I take all my vocals and all my vocal production. If you see, there's a ton of it going on. I have a left vocal, a right vocal, stacked behind the mains. Let's go to the chorus. On the choruses, we have our mains, we have our lefts and rights, and we have some low octaves probably. And then, you know, in the bridge and all these parts, there's some parts where there's just shouting and all sorts of different stuff. So if I bring out all the vocals, and all these vocals are generally treated the same. On the doubles, I usually don't bring up the air just so they don't get in the way of the main vocal, but there is a lot going on.
Snap my ankle right in two, and now I'm standing on one leg.
Room channel.
They don't love me like I do. Throw it away.
Usually, too, I vocal line the vocals so that they're perfectly in sync with each other on choruses. But for this band specifically, I chose to leave it loose. I wanted it to feel a little bit more like early 2000s Green Day or like 90s punk.
She don't know me like I do.
So then all the vocals, all of them, feed into this all bus, because when I'm doing a project like this where it's like really loud elements all around, I want to be able to control the overall vocal chain. And I want to be able to grid it together so that they feel glued to the rest of the mix. I'm running them into a 1073, all of the vocals, just high passing a little bit at 80 hertz, and then hitting it to the point where it starts to break up a smidge, and then controlling it with the trim, and then hitting RVox to compress the vocals a little bit more, and then soothe to find any buildup of frequencies, because there are a ton of vocals going on at once. The doubler and the reverb are skipping this all music bus because that's, to me, the stereo information of everything, and I didn't want to take away from that. I wanted that to still be intact and still be a little bit loose on the sides. So check it out on soothe of what I'm getting rid of.
Okay. She don't know me like I do.
And then some dynamic EQ controlling this low end of the vocal.
Okay.
It's kind of the poofiness of the vocal, giving it a little more bite in the mid-range and a little more air on the top end. And then, again, just controlling the sub information. And then the grossest plugin of all time on the setting that's removing mouth clicks. Check out what I'm getting rid of. That's what the inside of Lake Rana's mouth sounds like.
Okay.
And then just de-essing.
Know me like I do.
So all of those elements together, we get this.
She don't know me like I do. Sure don't know me, nothing new.
So before, when I was talking about the drum bus, I was talking about how I would do the individual drum mixes into the drum bus and sort of jump back and forth between those. I do the same thing getting to the mix bus. I'll get my general settings of the mix bus in, and then I'll adjust some things and levels of my individual tracks. The most important thing at this stage is to just massage the mix, check it out on different speaker settings or different speaker emulations, or go listen on AirPods, make your adjustments, and correct from there. So let's go through my mix bus chain here. First thing I'm hitting is gold clip, again, sort of bumping up the alchemy and the gold, which to me levels things out and then fixes some of the stereo information. Modern. At the loudest point in the song, it's probably clipping like 1 dB. Then I'm hitting this Cytomic mix bus compressor. This is a pretty standard mix setting. I used to have an SSL Bus Plus hardware compressor. As I have so many bands in, I was getting impatient waiting for things to print. I don't print through analog gear as much anymore. I only use it going on the way in. This compressor, the Glue or the SSL Bus Compressor by SSL, the plugin, both of those are my two favorite ones. I've tried the Waves one, and I've tried some other companies like Softtube, their versions of these, and these two have been my favorite. Some OG settings that a lot of producers use is just the release at 0.1 and the attack at 30, and getting about 3 to 4 dB of compression. Check it out. So I'm definitely going a little lighter than usual here because my buddy Austin Coop actually ended up mastering this track. He has the C2 compressor, which is like a better version of any of these SSL compressors. So I went a little bit lighter this time around. And then hitting Soothe. As you can see, it's pretty even across the board, which tells me I did a pretty good job at keeping things within reason. Mix centric, check it out on and off. And then Goal Foss Master, just touching a little bit, bringing in some of that high sizzle. Check it out if I crank this thing. So when you're really cranking it, you hear the sizzle of the cymbals, and the low end is a little bit more even. But yeah, I usually just use like a touch of this just to bring out some hi-fi-ness to the overall mix. And then I did a couple other things, made them inactive because they were sent off to mastering. But usually what I would use is like something like this BrainWorks BX 2098 EQ, because you can control the mid-side information. So in the mids, I boosted a little bit of 8K shelf, and then on the sides, I pulled down everything 12K up just to give it a little bit more stereo width. And then same thing with the low end. And then sometimes what I'll do is when it gets to a bigger part of the song, I'll boost up only the side information. Let's see if I did it here. Yep. So it looks like on the choruses, I boosted up the side information by not even 1 dB, almost 1 dB. So when the chorus hits, or any heavy part hits, watch it move. I'm kinda lovesick. Just to make it really hit you in the chest when the song. Originally, I hit CG2 to bring out some of the density and then volume. And then last thing would be some sort of multiband to control the low end. Overall EQ, a little bit of bump in the mid-range, a little bit more bump in the low, and a little bit of high shelf. And then I would hit something like God Complex or like a Fab Filter limiter, just something that can really boost all the information of the mix. So that is everything I have done to Lake Rana to make it slam and give it some identity and make it sound sick. Every mix I do, I treat differently, and I don't go in thinking, how can I mix this to sound perfect? How can I mix this to be competitive with this band? I don't really reference as I'm mixing. The only thing I'll do is maybe listen to some stuff right beforehand just to get my general like relative feel of what low end and high end should be. But I don't really reference as I mix because I think that the mixes always come out sounding a little more special if you start from scratch and it's truly just in my brain what I want to hear out of this specific song. Not out of this mix, but out of this song. So with all that information, let me know if you want to see more videos like this. I have a ton of different other stuff that I've mixed differently, and I hope that you took something from this and got better at mixing, or at least change your perspective on how you mix things. I appreciate you guys watching, and I'll catch you next time.